Om Ganati Mirandasya Gana Gana Salakya Chaksurun Militam Yanatashmai Sri Gurave Namaha Sri Chaitanya Manobhistam Stapitam Yanabhutare Shayam Rupa Karamayam Dharati Swaparandikam Vandeham Sri Guru Sita Parakamana Sri Gurun Vaishnavam Sri Rupam Sagaradam Sahagana Raganatam Vitam Stam Sadevam Sadvaitam Sabadutam Parijana Saitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Sri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Shivishikan Vitam Stam Guru Brahma Guru Vishnu Guru Deva Maheshwara Guru Shaksha Parabrahma Tashmai Shri Gurave Namaha Durgame Pati Meandasha Skarapate Shakripa Yasanan Santu Santu Benambaram Mukam Kavit Bakari Ansabharishmarane Pangagira Angare Katara Gana Hey Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dino Bandu Jagapate Gopisha Gopika Kanta Radhakanti Namostate Jayatam Surito Pango Mama Mandir Madhya Matsavasha Parambo Jarada Madharmo Sriman Rasa Rasadam Bamsi Bana Karsan Bena Shanubhago Gopinata Sri Gasaram Divya Brindana Nikapadumada Srimad Radnagara Shima Shanisto Shri Sri Radha Shira Govinda Deva Prasadavi Sevamanoshmarami Namo Brahmanya Devaya Go Brahmani Taya Chajikari Taya Krishnaya Govinaya Namo Mangalang Bhagavan Vishnu, Mangalam Guru Dhaja, Mangalam Panidikaksha, Mangalayatano, Om Narayana Vidmahi, Vasudevaya Dimahi, Tano Vishnu Pachodyatehe, Om Mahadevi Vidmahi, Vishnu Padniti Dimahi, Tano Lakshmi Pachodyatehe, Mahalakshmi Namastuvyam Sare Sri Hari Priya Namastuvyam Namastam Dada Tamta Kanjana Govanagi Radha Vindavaneshari Vishavanu Sute Devi Pranamani Hari Priya Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Pastaya Bhutare Shemari Bhakti Padanja Shami Tanam Namaste Sarasati Devi Guruvani Pachani Nirvijesa Sanibari Bhaskata Desana Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shiva Sari Gaur Bhaktavinda Hare Krishna 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 Hari 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 Rama 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 Hari Hari. There are thumbs up and likes going up and hearts going up already, and I haven't even said anything. That's great. Shows you're positively disposed towards whatever I have to say. You know, we often say, don't wait for the feelings to come before you act your way into the feelings. So don't wait to listen to what I have to say. Decide in advance that it's going to be fulfilling, on target, what I needed to hear today. So just go ahead and give those stars and thumbs up and hearts right in the very beginning. Thanks for doing that and for being on board. Bye, Bobby, doing RT and some or other listening at the same time. Brent, Manasaganga, Jean, Shukshma, happy Dvadasi. It's true. Yesterday was Ekadasi, a fast from grains, and we're talking about the fast of Maharaj Ambarish. Unlike ourselves, who just fast from grains for one day, Maharaj Ambarish fasted totally, even from water, for 1 year. And when he was about to break the fast, an Atiti, an uninvited guest named Ravasa Muni, came. So you can imagine the tension, wanting to break that fast, and at the same time having to properly receive the guest and prioritize his comfort, his meal, his honor, his respect. And that's our topic, the whole story that we've been discussing for the last 7 sessions have to do with that test which Krishna threw in the path of Maharaj Ambarish. Good morning, Gary Montana, and also to Rob here with us on the Zoom call. We talked yesterday about eating a meal, satiating one's hunger. The more one eats a material meal, an ordinary meal of fruits and vegetables and grains, the more remote, the more distant one becomes from one's hunger. While you're eating, you don't care about what's going on around you. You're hungry, you're weak, you're disoriented, you're feeling uncomfortable. So you just dive into that food, not only physically, but mentally as well. You block out everything else and you focus pretty much exclusively on that food. But as you become more and more progressively satisfied, as each mouthful is chewed and digested and your stomach gets a little bit more full, then you become, then again, proportionally disinterested in the food and more interested in your surroundings, getting back to what it was you were doing before the hunger disrupted or distracted you. But that's not the case when you taste the nectar of Krishna Katha. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare. Initially, it's similar because you, just as the hungry man loses interest in his surroundings and focuses pretty much exclusively on the smell, the sight, and especially the taste of the meal. Similarly, when one begins in devotional service, one has been without food for the soul for who knows how many lifetimes, for who knows how many tens of thousands of years. So certainly one is going to appreciate the nectarine food for the soul to the exclusion of outside activities. Now, in that sense, the beginning stages of devotional service have a lot of parallels to an ordinary man sitting down to an ordinary meal. But the difference is that the more you eat, the more you practice Krishna consciousness, the more you associate with devotees, the more you take prasadam, the more you join in the kirtans, the more you read the literature and discuss with others. And far from being satiated by the taste of prasadam and chanting the holy names and discussion, you become more interested. You become more and more keen. And it's true, initially, you blocked out the outside world. You sort of lost interest in it. But whereas the hungry man loses interest only temporarily and goes back to it, he who takes up the path of devotional service never goes back to it. He becomes more and more interested in savoring the rasa, the mellows of devotional service to Krishna. And he never goes back. Of course, someone may say, true, well, you've had people leave the movement, go back to material life. They never really went back to material life. Atavasya padam bojo makarandikam kimanyara sarabe ayusho yadasare. Nobody who's tasted the nectar of the lotus feet of the Lord, who's associated with devotees, who's taken sumptuous prasadam, who's sat in or danced in the kirtan, ever is the same person again. They can try to go back to material life. They can make a mighty effort to do it, but they'll never be the same. Krishna's spoiled you. Some of the devotees compare Krishna to a black snake. And unlike being bitten by an ordinary snake, for an ordinary snake, there's anti-venoms. Even in Vedic culture, there were mantras that Brahmins could chant to counteract the poison of a snake bite. When you're bitten by an ordinary snake, there are remedies, there are ways to counteract it. But when you're bitten by the black snake of Krishna, that's it. You're finished. There isn't any way to counteract it. You can try, you can twist and turn, but you're never, I'm sorry, you're never going to be the same. That's why one devotee says, Shmaran Bangi Chaya Pachadam Sachi Vishram Dharam Vamsina Shta Kachanam Chandakanam Govinda Kyam Hari Tanam Isha Keshir Titrabante Maprekshashash Tabadi Sake Bandhu Sangeshanam. Tongue in cheek, this devotee, and maybe Narottam Das Thakur, I'm not sure. He says, if you're attached to family, friends, and country, if you want your life to stay as it is, you want to preserve the status quo, you don't want to rock the boat, and there's one thing you have to be sure that you don't do. Shmaran Bangi, Chiraparchatam Sachi Vishnaramiram says, do not wander in the moonlight by the bank of the Yamuna River and happen upon Krishna with a smile on his face and a flute to his lips, standing in his threefold bending form, playing the fifth note on his flute, being bathed by the rays of the moonlight. You'll never be the same again. When that black snake of Krishna bites you with his beauty, his name, his form, his qualities and activities, you're forever changed. You're forever affected. You'll never be the same again. And so the number one thing you have to do is if you want to stay in the rut that you're in, you don't want to progress, you don't want to go forward, you want to continue revolving in cycle of birth, death, disease, and old age, being placed from one womb to another, to another, to another, another, trying mightily for happiness in this material world and being frustrated lifetime after lifetime after life. If that's okay with you, if okay is okay, if good enough is good enough, then I remember we did the Festival of Colors in Santa Cruz one year. It's a long drive. And, you know, some of the assistants who were with me wanted to pack up and they wanted to start the trip home as early as possible. But my thought was, you know, the park people have rented the park to us. They've done it under certain conditions. They've made it clear that if we don't do a thorough cleanup, it'll be one and done. They'll never give us permission to come back. And so I thought it was more important than jumping in the truck and making our way back east to Utah to spend an extra hour cleaning up the colors. We use a leaf blower and we blow the whole area. It's right next to the river there. And as you can imagine, Santa Cruz is one of the most environmentally tough places in the country. Northern California is that way, but especially people who live in Santa Cruz, they're really concerned. And that river was running right through town. And so they were concerned about any spillover, wash in the river. So I wanted to stay and do a thorough job of cleaning. And this one fellow, he kept saying, true. In fact, he wouldn't even help me. They went and sat on a hill somewhere. He said, it's good enough. True, you're fanatic. You're fanatic. Well, if you want to be Krishna consciousness, I'll give you a heads up. Good enough is not good enough. You're not, Krishna didn't make you to be average to mediocre, to get stuck where you are and not move forward. But if that's your priority, if you don't want to rock the boat, you want to stay in the same old, terminally boring revolution of birth, death, disease, and old age, then you just have to do one thing. Do not chance upon that smiling boy playing his flute, bathed in the moonlight by the Yamuna River. Shmadam Bangi Traya Parchitam Satyavishanam Vamsina Stadakaram Chandakenam. Chandakenam means moonlight. Shmaran means smile. Simone. Keshi Ghat means near near Keshi Ghat, on the banks of the Yamuna. Just avoid that, and you'll be you won't have to worry about going back to home, back to Godhead, or achieving anything out of the ordinary. Fortunately for us, Maharaj Ambarish is a standard bearer for the transcendent, for excellence. He's a personification. He's the repudiation of material life, a limited, temporary, dissatisfying life. He's the repudiation of getting stuck and staying in the same place. They use the term sit, soak, and sour. Well, if there's anything that Maharaj Ambarish or any pure devotee is not going to do, it is they are not going to sit, soak, and sour. Now, he was king of the world. He had sovereignty over all 7 continents. You can imagine devotion to Krishna, bhakti, Krishna love was foremost in his mind. Savai Mana Krishna Paradav, his mind was absorbed in thoughts of Krishna. His feet were doing work around the temple. Savo Karo Mandiro, his hands were cleaning the temple. He was hearing from the great saints and speaking and participating in the kirtan. This was his primary activity. You can just imagine the magnificence of the palaces and the temples that existed under Maharaj Ambarish's reign. And as the king, he was in a position to set an example that all the citizens would be Krishna conscious, pious, righteous, honest, attend the temples. He had influence and power on a level that perhaps never before and never again in the history of the world he had. And yet he didn't stay there. He recognized that Krishna is always working in newer and newer ways. He wants further and further and higher levels for us. And so once everything was ideal and Maharaj Ambarish no longer had to work to maintain the harmonious kingdom, it was kind of on its own, going on its own. Everybody was enjoying the bliss of Krishna consciousness. They didn't necessarily need Maharaj Ambarish at the helm. They would have certainly wanted him. They would have physically prevented him from leaving the helm and going to the forest. But his conclusion was that now Krishna wants me to go to the next level. I've done everything I could for others, para upakaram. Now I need to go to the forest and exclusively concentrate on Krishna consciousness. And so although he had power and influence and leverage on a level that we can't even imagine, it is said that he left his palace, he left his kingship, he left his family in order to go to the forest. Why? Not just to give up stuff. We talked yesterday, the renunciate is only defined by what he gives up. The bhakti is defined by what he accepts. Om Tad Vishnu Paramam Param Sada Pasanti Suryo Diviva Chakshara Aditam Yadvi Pashvo Vapanyavo Jagavam Sam Samiti Devyashanu Param Param. The devotee accepts the lotus feet of Krishna on his head, just like we always have the sun above us and we always have the sunshine on our head. Even if it's coming through the clouds, we still have the sunshine on our heads, we still get nourishment. It is due to the presence of the sun. Even if we can't see it, even if it's blocked by clouds, it's still due to the sunlight, which filters through the clouds that we're able to see. We have health, we have vitality. All the food that we eat wouldn't be here without the sun. The sun, we're dependent on the sun. And whatever success, whatever satisfaction, whatever pleasure we get, it would not be there without the sun. And so Maharaj Ambarish recognizes that the highest position is to concentrate all of one's faculties in service to the lotus feet of Krishna. And his position is compared to that of an ordinary, greedy, materialistic person, a businessman. Let's say he just made a deal where he gets $5 million. Now, $5 million is more than he could spend in his lifetime. It's more than he needs, certainly. Even the richest man, when he sits down, he's going to get dal, rice, and chapatis. It's the healthiest meal is dal, rice, and chapatis, which is pennies, really. He may have 10 houses, but he could only live in one house at a time. 10 houses just compounds his responsibilities, his stress, just a distraction. So Maharaj Ambarish is leaving all of this in order to concentrate on Krishna consciousness, to compound the Krishna consciousness that he's already assimilated within his body. Just as a mercantile man, even though he has $5 million, even though it's more than enough for him, for his family, to supply all their needs, shelter, transportation, food, he doesn't stop. Being impelled by greed, he wants more. He likes the challenge. He wants to feel more and more and more influential and powerful. And he wants more and more people to recognize him. Even he might want to give more and more to his church or more and more to charity. That's also part of this self-congratulation, self-aggrandizement. So the devotee is the same way. We have senses. Our spiritual selves have senses. The spirit has desires, has ambitions, has dreams. And so when we're greedy for more and more Krishna consciousness, as Maharaj Ambarish was, when we don't want to get stuck in one place, but we want to keep moving forward and rising higher and higher and higher, that is the real application of greed. Some pseudo-spiritualists think that when we become liberated, we no longer feel, we no longer smell, we no longer taste, we're no longer individuals. Everything that we call ourselves dissolves, dissipates, you say, in a kind of a impersonal fog. They use the example that we're drops that come from the ocean, and when we get liberated, we merge with the ocean, become one undifferentiated, homogeneous living being. And yet that is misleading. That is not the conclusion of the scriptures. We have senses, and as senses, we feel like that we want more and more and more and more and more. This is called appetites. The senses have appetites, and there's nothing wrong with that, provided we use it for Krishna. We want more and more and more. It is said in the Madhya Lila of the Chaitanya Charita, 8th chapter, 7th verse, Krishna bhakti rasha bhavitamatim kriyatam kuto pilabhyate tata lolam apimulamekaram janma sukutir krita lalabhyate. What is the symptom of someone like Maharaj Maharaj Ambarish, who is getting purified? The symptom is that greed in its purified state makes its appearance. One wants to move forward, rise higher. Krishna Bhakta Rasa Bhavita Mati. When you get that greed for Krishna, then you're detached. Our subject matter is the detachment of Maharaj Pariksit. Gosh, I don't know why I keep saying Pariksit. Maharaj Ambarish. To the degree that he's attached to Krishna, to the degree that he has greed to advance more and more in Krishna consciousness, to the inverse proportion, he has no more greed for the temporary things of this material world. He has no more greed for sense gratification. Yad pada pankaja palashivara karmasinam gatita gatiyantu tadavama sharikta matio shutukaram tam adanam bhajavasadevam. There are none who control the senses as completely and as thoroughly and as happily as those who are engaged in the service of the Lord. The path of renunciation of the senses, renunciation of activity, suppression of the senses will never be successful because you can never ultimately repress the senses. They will emerge. They will reappear. And if you try to repress them when they reappear, they'll be upset. They won't be happy. It's like a rubber band. You put pressure on the rubber band, you stretch it, but when you release it, then it has that power. It stings you. It hurts you. So all those who have tried to repress the senses throughout history, they have had the opposite reaction to what they had intended. Nakuriyad karichit sakyam manashirvash yadvishram charasharam chashkanda tapa aisharam. In the 9th canto, we read about Subari Muni. He was so successful at repressing his senses. It's almost unbelievable. It's almost unbelievable how he was able to repress his senses to this degree. He lived underwater for many, many years. Some or other, he was able to breathe and maintain his life, and he lived underwater for many, 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 many years. Now, who can do that? I think you'd agree with me that, it's one thing to practice yoga and self-restraint when you've got plenty of oxygen, plenty of your natural environment around you. But how upset the mind becomes when we're underwater. Some of us can hold our breath for 60 seconds, some for 90 seconds. I talked to one volunteer here. He held his breath for 3 minutes underwater. But after that, you lose all composure. You freak out. You give way to hysteria. The oxygen's not getting to your brain anymore. Imagine the skill and self-control that Subari Muni had, that he was able to live underwater for hundreds of years. And yet, did that solve the problem? Was he never again bothered by the senses? No. In fact, it had the rubber band effect. He one day saw 2 fish copulating. And the sight of those 2 fish copulating was enough to cause him to fall down. He then wanted to go that path. He went to king, I think the king's name was Mandata. He asked the king, Mandata had 50 daughters. He said, give me one of your daughters. Now, you can imagine having meditated underwater for a long time. He didn't look too good. He was, how you stay in the pool, the community pool, a little too long, and then your fingers, dried up like prunes, wrinkled and everything. So he must have been extremely wrinkled, smelled bad, smelled like fish. The king didn't really want to give him one of his daughters. But kings are diplomatic. They learn the art of diplomacy. And so his way of denying any of his daughters to Subari Muni was to say, oh yeah, any daughter that picks you, I'll give her away as your bride. Thinking, which one of my beautiful young girls is going to pick this ugly, smelly, wrinkled old man? So it's a way of saying no without saying no. Subari Muni all of a sudden got some self-awareness. And due to his combination of yogi powers, he transformed himself into the most sweet-smelling, handsome, good-looking, desirable young man. And so the king's ploy backfired on him. He had intended none of his daughters to marry Subari, told Subari that anyone that picks you can marry you. So they all picked him. So from living as a celibate under the water, he had 50 wives. And from each wife, he had 100 children. So his family members numbered 5,000. And then he said, Aho Vichanam, Bratasya, Tapasya, this is where I've come as a result of all this repression, of all the austerities that I've done, of observing a vow to live underneath the water without oxygen. This is where I ended up with 50 wives and a household of 5,000. He said, don't. He's giving advice to future generations. He said, don't try to repress your senses. Not only is it not going to work, it may seem to be working for some time, but that is illusory. It's going to rebound on you. It's going to bite you eventually, just as I've been bitten. From having no worries, from being single, unattached, living not only in the forest, but underwater where no one can even find me, even if they wanted to. Now I've got to pay the bills, make the repairs, deal with the handyman, pay my taxes for a family of 5,000. You never run that risk in devotional service. Yad pada pankaja pilasha karmasyam gadita. Karmasyam, because you don't repress your natural tendency to be active. God gave us talents and abilities, and we're only happy when we use those in honoring he from whom they come. Yad pada pankaja. It's amazing how much self-control devotees have because they're following the footsteps of Maharaj Ambarish. Whether they're in the palace or whether in the forest, whether in the city, whether in the country, whether in an office or whether in a farm, they do everything for Krishna. If they make a salary, they give 10% to Krishna or more. If they're poets or writers, they write for Krishna. If they know how to fix cars, they fix Krishna's cars. If they're lawyers like our Govinda Dev, they take up Krishna's legal interests. Whatever talent, ability you have, you know, like we said yesterday, you repress that, you're insulting Krishna. Krishna gave you something, and his intention is that you use it to honor him and uplift your fellow men. So when you turn up your nose or you spurn those gifts which Krishna have sent your way, you're becoming an offender. You're disregarding what Krishna has specifically and strategically invested you in to work his wonders in the world. One time I heard a story about a famous composer, and he was some big Rachmaninov or something, a big orchestra of 100 people or something. And a guy had a little tiny flute. I think it's called a pan flute or something. And in the course of the music, the symphony, they were practicing. He thought to himself, what use is this? You know, there's big cymbals and there's drums and there's violins and there's trumpets. You know, what difference does it make? So he stopped joining in. At a point when he was supposed to join with his little flute, he bagged it, you know. And immediately the famous conductor, stopped everything and he said, "Where is the flute?" He knew it immediately. And so when Krishna gives you a hand, he gives you tools that you're meant to make this world a better place and to assist others after the end of this life to go back to home, back to Godhead. And you pass on that, you turn up your nose on that in the name of renunciation. You know, your family is depending on you. Your country is depending on you. Your generation, Krishna is depending on you. And I'm sorry to say, you just let them down. The Mayavadis, the Monists, the ascetics, the yogis, all of whom are taken with their mystic power and their ability to repress the senses temporarily, none of them are going to get the favor of Krishna. None of them are going to be able to step into the middle of what Krishna has created them for, of what Krishna has planned for them. And how can you be happy when you don't please your creator? On the other hand, those who are engaged in devotional service, who are using their senses in the service of the master of the senses, Rishikesha, Rishikena, Sevaram, Sarvapati, Vinirmuktam. Vinirmuktam means, non-devotees and pseudo-spiritualists and ascetics, they look at the devotees. Devotees are driving cars. Devotees are going to Sam's Club. Devotees are traveling on airplanes. Devotees are cleaning with a broom. They're down on their knees in the dirt, in the garden. And pseudo-spiritualists or impersonalists think of the devotees as mundane. Think of them as ordinary. Think of them as not at all free. And yet the path to freedom, according to the great authorities, is sarvapadi vinirmuktam tattatena nirvalam. It's not to deny the senses, not to throw out the baby with the bathwater. The senses are not the problem. The problem is that we're not using them in the way they were meant to be used. We're not using them properly. Ishan Bogni Bodhiva Dashanti Terdanopara Yobuk Destiny. Everything is given to us by God to be used to honor him. And when we do that, he gives us more, and a wonderful cycle is set up. But when you shut things away and misuse them in the name of family, friends, and country, not only does Krishna not give you more, but it's impossible for you to be happy. It's impossible for you to be happy. The path to liberation, freedom from all stress, anxiety, from repeated birth, death, disease, and old age is not to deny the senses, but to purify the senses. Not to throw out the baby with the bathwater, keep the baby and just throw out the dirty bathwater. And that is achieved. Sarva Padi Vinirmagam type of Bharam. These senses are created by the Lord. You can think of our senses as an extension of the Lord's senses, and we need to use them according to his preferences. And when we do that, we become purified at heart. We become joyful. We see the last of our material miseries. We become strong and empowered. And we also stop thinking of ourselves in terms of superficial externals. We no longer think of ourselves in terms of material designations: Black, white, Christian, Hindu, Muslim, Jew, male, female, American, etc., etc. We simply think of ourselves as servants of Krishna. This state of consciousness, this level of activity, which is always full of nectar, which is relishable and constantly expanding. Nava, Nava, Rasha, Dumani, and Yandamnim. One of the great alwars of South India. He said, Yadavi Mama Cheta Krishna Paravanin Nava Nava Rasha Dumani Taravadi Batan and Sangamani Bhavati Mukha Sistinisti Varam Cha. He was also a great king. He had wives, he had children. Kings are allowed a little alcohol, a little gambling. You're allowed to go hunting to keep their martial. There's some latitude given to the kings because of their unique position. He had all the sense gratification that you could possibly want. And yet his life was dull, predictable. Punat panas chervidanam. There was nothing new in it. It was the same old eating, sleeping, mating, defending. You can eat on a big banquet table in the palace. You can mate with a beautiful, beautiful, beautiful girl. You can sleep in an expensive bed. You can hone your martial arts skills so as to be a feared and lethal warrior. But it's all just basically the same four activities as the animals, who also eat, sleep, mate, and defend, although on a more elemental, primitive level. So there's no great credit to polishing up your eating, sleeping, mating, defending. The purpose of the human form of life is to realize God, to become God consciousness, and to go back to home, back to Godhead, never again have to return to this material one. So this is called the pearl of great price, the pearl of great tata lalam mulam ekala. That when someone who's spiritually inclined, when someone who's fed up with the interminable cycle of birth, death, disease, and old, who's fed up with animalistic, limited living, hears about bhakti, love of God, devotional service to God available. It's like someone who hears about a pearl which is available in the marketplace. The pearl is the most valuable pearl in the world. That's why it's called the pearl of great price. Someone who wants that pearl above and beyond everybody else, they don't go with an intention of negotiating, bargaining, and haggling. They recognize that that pearl is worth more than they could ever pay for it. What they do is they liquidate all their assets. They bring the deed to their house. They bring the keys to the car. They bring the key to the safety deposit box, and they throw it at the feet of the merchant, and they hope and they pray that and it's not even the quantity. It's not the dollar value of what you give, because you're basically, to get that pearl, the merchant, the person who has that pearl, is really not going to give it to you because you paid for it. They're going to give it to you because you gave up everything. Whether everything for you is $5 or whether everything for you is $5 million, the price for that pearl is everything that you have. Atapi te deva padambu jabaya prashada shada janati bhaktam nachanyo eko picharan bidam. The only way that you can get the priceless gift of devotional service is through the causeless mercy that comes from the lotus feet of the Lord and the devotees. Imagine a merchant. You've got a pearl that's worth billions of dollars. Someone comes up and gives you $5 million for it. Why are you going to give $1 billion pearl to someone who's giving $5 million? Well, if they gave $5 million, but they're worth 25 million, you're not going to give it to them. But if they gave every penny, if their net worth is 5 million and they gave everything, then you recognize that they're going to use it. They're going to fully take advantage of it. They want this above and beyond and to the exclusion of everything else. That's going to soften your heart. And you can say, okay, take it. Someone else may come and give $5. You're not going to spit on them. You're not going to be contemptuous of them or look down on them. What you're going to ask is $5 all you got? Is $5 everything you got? Because the price for this pearl is, there's no dollar amount. It is, the price is everything you have. Do you want it badly enough? Are you greedy enough to give everything, whether it's $5 or $5 million, in order to obtain it? And that was the wonderful banner, the standard that Maharaj Ambarish set. He was willing to give up sovereignty of all 7 continents. He was willing to give up all the pleasures and all the concessions that are made to those of the kingly order in order to go off into the forest and without distractions, concentratedly, focusedly, blissfully, ecstatically chant Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. That might be a good place to stop. Thank you so much for joining me. I really relish the opportunity to sit with you. Motivational Monday, Transcendental Tuesday, Wisdom Wednesday. Bye, Bobby. Thanks for listening while taking care of the deities this morning. I will be doing the deities Thursday, Friday, Saturday, which is why I don't give these classes those 3 days. My better half does it Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, which frees me up for this particular service, sharing Krishna conscious insights with all of you sincere listeners out there who are Brent. I've become more and more impressed as time goes on with Brent's seriousness about listening. He is completely serious about listening. And that means that he will be completely successful in his Krishna consciousness journey. And in fact, he listens so much that he's my choice. When I'm no longer not available to lecture or for any other reason, he's my go-to guy. I'll go to Brent to give the Sunday class. He even gave a class to over 100 people 2 Saturdays ago in Salt Lake City, and everybody said he did a good job. Why did he do a good job? Because he listens. Those who listen, you go in 2 ears, then what you speak from one mouth, it's going to be the right thing. It's going to have that Shakti. Manasa Ganga, thank you very much. She listens, and whatever she integrates, she displays in her devotional artwork. Jean, thank you, Jean, for never being absent. Shukshma, as she crisscrosses the country, drops in us quite frequently. Gary's practically a daily attendee now. Natasha, let me know what I can do for you. I know you've got a big house, you've got so many responsibilities, so many kids. I know that lionizes your time, but let me know. Let me know what I can do. Send you a book or come by and get some prasadam. Let me know how I can serve you in your devotional life. Govinda Dev, he told me last night that his granddaughter had a very successful surgery on her spleen, and she's well on the road to recovery. Guru Tran Singh, thank you very much for dropping in. Please accept my obeisances. All glories to Prabhupada. See, we have some repeat comments here from Bhai Bobby and Shukshma. Britta from Ogden, who has a great wit and a great way with the words, says she's jumping in from work this morning. The daily grind can't stop me. Maharaj Ambarish did a great job with the daily grind. He transformed all of his citizens and all of his associates into Krishna consciousness. And then when the time was right, he went to the forest. So if you're going to go to the forest at some time in the future, probably the forests of northern Utah are not the best place. Maybe some forests further south. You can imagine in those days, the forests must have been so pure and pristine, so livable. I read that even during the Great Depression, when people didn't have work and didn't have income, there are a lot of pictures of people in the Depression going through the forests and getting edible roots and herbs. And there are a lot of, there's even an app. I even have an app on my phone. You just take a picture of a bush and it'll tell you whether it's edible or whether it's not and what its qualities are. But we don't have forests now, even like we did in the 1920s and 1930s. It's not very heartening to think that if there's a depression or some reverse, we won't really be able to go to the forest because, number one, our population is so much greater. Number two, our urbanization is so much more widespread. And number three, of course, because of the first two, we don't really have forests to speak of, at least not nearby, not adjoining our communities and our cities that we can stroll through and pick enough herbs and roots and berries to sustain ourselves. Anyway, be that as it may, try to become Krishna consciousness, get out of this material world ASAP, and act in such a way that you don't have to come back later on in Kali Yuga when things will be even worse than they are now. So thank you again, and nothing better than to end with some of Rob's takeaways. Can you share those with us, Rob, and send them to me by email? Toot sweet.
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji, gladly. All right. The more you learn, the more you yearn. Once you're Krishna bit, you're done. That's it. You'll never quit. Use your gift to uplift.
Nice.
With Krishna aligned to be spiritually sublime. And align the grind to have peace of mind.
What was the first word?
Align the grind to have peace of mind.
ALIGN, align,
yes.
Align the grind. Okay, good.
That's all I had.
Well, thank you. Thank you. you know, that's also another sign of good listening. You know, when I joined, I always used to take notes. Some or other, the flow of sound from the ears through the hand helped to embed the teachings more deeply. And so what Rob's doing is taking what he hears and translating into pithy little sayings. Is really good for his own spiritual purification. Highly recommended. And you'll see those shortly when I post on Facebook. Thanks for being with us. All of you, pretty much all of you have been with us Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday. We'll be back next week. We'll have some talks on the weekend as well. And don't forget to chant Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare. Oh, one other announcement. Thursday, day after tomorrow. No, tomorrow in Salt Lake City, Radhika Raman will be present for the observance of Lord Nityananda's appearance day. He will be giving the keynote talk. He is, in my opinion, a pure devotee and extremely articulate. And so if you want an experience which is not ordinary average, you want to experience someone who's excellent in every way in their practice of Krishna consciousness, then if possible, physically go to see Radhika Raman, as I'm going to do. Otherwise, they'll most likely put it on Facebook Live. So that'll be, he'll be speaking at 7 o'clock, from 7 to 7:30 on Thursday night. And you can go to the Hare Krishna Facebook page to catch it live. And presumably it will stay on afterwards. So if you're not free, then you can catch it later. So that's Nityananda's appearance day. It's coming Thursday. Kirtan from 6:30 to 7, talk from 7 to 7. No, Arti, no, Abhishek, bathing and Kirtan from 6:30 to 7, talk from 7 to 7:30. Arti from 7:30 to 7:45 or so, and then Prashad. Thank you, and Hare Krishna.